Okay, everybody, this is Robert, your instructor of Political Science 201, March 2019. This is a review video for the exam that needs to be completed by 3/19/19. Make sure it's completed by the end of the day. The link should be available, so if you need to take it during the weekend, that's fine with me. Please just don't share anything with anybody. Um, and there's going to be 50 questions, multiple choice, and you'll have 2 hours to complete. So if we look at the first term, what are consensus American values? Remember, that's the whole John Locke thing. Private property, limited government, and individual liberty are consensus values that we have. Be able to find pluralism, and pluralism is kind of that system where groups compete and bargain. Know what elite theory is, and that any organization that we have is going to have elitism to it, and know the differences between elitism and pluralism. Know what the term natural law means, and natural law guarantees all of us liberty and right to property. How was slavery addressed in the Constitution? Remember, we talked about the Three-Fifths Compromise, an agreement to not end the slave trade until after 1808, and requiring the return of runaway slaves were all mentioned in the Constitution. Um, Also, remember that prior to the 17th Amendment, the only thing that the people voted for was House of Representative members. Know the system of checks and balances that we talk about. No vetoing by Congress, vetoing by the president, overriding the veto through Congress. And when we talk about the founders, know their demographics, where they were trained in, what they practice. A lot of them were law professionals, so know that. Um, know the ruling in Dred Scott. Dred Scott basically said that slavery was protected because African Americans and slaves were considered property and not citizens. Know the term deunionization and what that means. Currently, we have about 13% of the workforce are part of unions. So union membership has gone down, and as a result of jobs going out overseas and laws getting passed to protect the workers, unions aren't as strong as they used to be. When we talked about immigration, remember that support for immigration will generally come from business elites. The pain of people, maybe a little bit less than minimum wage. Um, Also know um, the concept of how the top 1/5 of income recipients earn about half of our income. Know that education is generally an way that we develop a tolerance and maybe a respect for civil liberties. And in some instances, groups are occur when groups usually can instruct the masses on what attitudes, uh, proper attitudes should be. Increased tolerance by the masses for different social groups occur when elites instruct the masses on what their proper attitudes should be. No example of ignorance. And remember, when we talk about sustained political activity, who votes in our society? Remember, it's usually older people. But one thing to also kind of take into account is when we have some type of issue that happens in America or some type of disaster, the government tends to restrict liberties to protect democracy. And that happened after the 9/11 attacks, where a lot of people were in favor of the Patriot Act without knowing really what the Patriot Act entailed. Know that the greatest threat to democracy is single issue interest groups. Know what a responsible party system is and what that does. Know that nominees for public office are determined by primary elections. Be able to tell me what de-alignment is. De-alignment is when one social group detaches themselves from a political party and joins another political party. No, uh, they don't join a party. So this is when people drop out of a group and don't attach themselves to either party, and that's considered de-alignment. Realignment is what I made the mistake of saying. Realignment is when a social group detaches themselves from one party and aligns themselves with another party. So when we compare presidential elections to primary elections, usually the participation rate is about one half of what the presidential election has compared to the primary. So if we usually have 60% of the people participating in a presidential election, generally a primary election will have roughly a half of that. Know that the adult population who are party activists is relatively less than 5%. And really also kind of want to emphasize that no independent candidate has ever been elected to the White House. How do you appeal to the majority of voters? A party must move themselves to the ideological middle. You have to appeal to candidates in the, voters in the ideological middle to solicit your votes. Know that sometimes voters don't have information about specific policies when they vote, and political parties really have no direct means of holding their elected officials responsible for enacting party positions or carrying out party platforms. Know who comprises the Democratic Party? We spoke a little bit about direct democracy. Know that you need 8% to pass a constitutional amendment to the California Constitution, and you need 8% of the number of people who voted in the most recent election for governor to qualify for the ballot. So remember, that's that 500,000 criteria that we need to get signatures to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. Know what the 10th Amendment says? The 10th Amendment says that the federal law will trump state law. Know that in the initiative process, usually we have a criteria of 51. To raise a tax, remember, it's going to be 66%. Know about Aaron Persky and how he was kicked out of office. He was voted out through a recall. Know what powers were reserved for the states in the Articles of Confederation. Know the Connecticut Compromise, the New Jersey Plan, and the Virginia Plan. And know what Federalist 51 established. Federalist 51 basically established separation of powers and checks and balances, which led to trying to prevent the tyranny of the majority. So we have some checks and balances. Know what Proposition 13 was, and it limited property values to 1%. And know the vital aspects of democracy, which are equality before the law, one person, one vote, and we're all equal. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. This video should be able to help you in the midterm. Just make sure you fill out the terms and that are on this list, and you should be okay. All right, I'll see you guys later.